come back to some of those basics of when you're looking for a load building. Put your name, print your name, and put your cell phone number on your bills of lading. Point it out to the customer and say, hey, if I pull out of the dock and there's a problem or a question, you call me directly.
Just a small tactic there you heard at the top from none other than Overdrive's own contributing writer and an independent owner-operator coach now after decades behind the wheel of his own one-truck business. That'd be Gary Buchs. A familiar voice, no doubt, to many in the audience. Buchs was laying out a simple way to be more in tune with what the trucking business truly is at bottom, a customer service business. And as was emphasized earlier this week in Overdrive's Work-Life Balance seminar with past small fleet champ Jason Cowan and the innovative logistics group owner-operator services firms Adam Wingfield, anything you can do to strengthen your relationships with those who feed you freight is of the utmost importance in a time like the present. I'm Todd Dills, and there's a lot more about that and what follows in today's edition of Overdrive Radio, dropping in the podcast feed Friday, May 26th, heading into the Memorial Day weekend. If you're coming to us from the world-famous OverdriveOnline.com, you're probably seeing this on Memorial Day itself. And here's hoping you're able to take the time out to pay respects with memory for the fallen of our nation's long history. This edition features a talk headed up by the great Eric Harley, longtime Red Eye Radio host, following in the footsteps of radio legend Bill Mack from earlier in his career. Harley invited myself and Gary Buchs, along with our Partners in Business collaborator Mike Hosted from ATBS, to sit in with him for a roundtable discussion tied to the new edition of the Owner-Operator Manual. The conversation was recorded at the Mid-America Trucking Show just a couple months back, and originally aired in its full form as part of the Red Eye Radio Extra Mile podcast series, available at redeyeradioshow.com. Overdrive has also released a series of short video excerpts of the talk via the YouTube channel, youtube.com/overdrivemag. You can also find them via the Partners in Business section of overdriveonline.com. It's a wide-ranging talk focused on vital aspects of owner-operator business practice, from basic task management from Harley, spinning out the metaphors to put things in perspective.
I don't have to climb the Everest. I can break it down into small hills along the way and say, okay, I can take a week or two with this and say, these are the hours I'm going to dedicate to that.
ATBS's Mike Hosted, letting you know what you might well be giving up if you're not paying very close attention to the tax code.
And we look at their past tax return, and they didn't even claim the per diem deduction,
Wow.
which is a daily food allowance when you're on the road. It's
Right.
$69 a day right now.
Wow.
So the average independent contractor is getting $14,000 to $16,000 in deductions just for their food allowance, and we see that missed constant.
And Gary Buchs, of course, ever mindful of the absolute necessity of cost and revenue awareness, real engagement with the numbers.
Real-time information is a motivator. It has meaning. It's touching those numbers.
On the other side of a break, we'll dive right in and let the tape roll. Hopefully, an engaging back and forth for the long haul this weekend, this coming week, whatever the case may be. Keep tuned.
Every diesel needs to defend against clogged injectors, low lubricity, and slipping fuel economy. The best defense is the best defender. House Diesel Defender with advanced IDX4 detergent. Get a deeper clean, maximum lubricity, and boosted fuel economy. Guaranteed. House Diesel Defender. Get optimal performance. House. For every diesel.
Here's a big thanks to the more than century-old House company for their support of Overdrive Radio. You can find them and more information about Diesel Defender and other of their fuel treatments and products via HOWES, houseproducts.com. Here's Eric Harley, setting things up with an anecdote about the pace of change in trucking, and a question directed to me about the annual, continual updating Overdrive does to its start-to-finish business manual for owner-operators, released at Matt's on the occasion of the talk. That's Partners in Business, of course, which you can find and download free of charge via overdriveonline.com/PIB. Here's Eric.
I've been doing the all-night show for 27 years, and I remember coming on board, cell phones were new, and drivers didn't want cell phones because they were like, a lot of drivers were reluctant. I don't want to be called 24/7. I don't want to be tracked down 24/7. And then that quickly evolved to everybody having a cell phone, and then smartphones, and then it was, oh man, look at this app, look at that app, and look at what I can do here, and the great efficiencies that came along with that technology. When you go back, a couple of decades here with Partners in Business, I'm guessing it's the same kind of perspective of looking of that evolution of everything, and it must require some tremendous partners like ATBS in order to get this out in a year. Because if you think about all that can happen in just 1 year, my simple mind is going to that thinking, wow, how do they get it done in a year? Because there's so many changes. But what has that been like, over the years for Overdrive, with this manual coming out every year, with all the changes that are constantly in play?
Yeah, I mean, there's constantly new inputs, new tools. And over that long term, like you mentioned, it's things have really evolved from the amount of tools that are available. And one of the things we like to do with the manual and with the coverage that we provide daily and at the overdriveonline.com website, is help people really know how to use these tools. That's a big thing that I think gets overlooked a lot. And I know ATBS has through the years done much the same with access to their platform. And Mike might be able to talk a little bit about the evolution of the tools that are available through them and the speed at which owner-operators can use their service and others to really get a close handle on costs. I think that's kind of it's one of the biggest issues going in over the last year and a little bit more now.
Sure.
And it's just it's a constant frustration, I know, for folks out there trying to keep a daily handle on how costs are fluctuating for them.
Yeah.
Seems obvious when you look up at the fuel pump, but there's a lot more to it, right?
There is a lot more to it, and that's a great transition. Mike Hosted from ATBS. We go back, man. I remember with the Amons, and the advent of ATBS and this idea of the business side of trucking. And Todd just hit on something, and that is, those costs. One of the things that has been preached in the business, and I know you guys talk about this quite a bit, is that cost per mile. But man, the fluctuations can be so great. So what do you guys experience there at ATBS in that very, fundamental, I guess, starting point of that cost per mile, and how to stay on top of being able to calculate that and maintain your knowledge of your cost per mile?
Yeah, great question. I think we've evolved a lot in terms of the speed, as Todd had mentioned, in getting that information to owner-operators. I think there are a number of owner-operators that don't even know their cost per mile and really need to get a handle on it, because it's such an important tool when you're trying to decide which load to take or how you're going to get home and cover your fixed costs and things like that. So you really need to understand it, and really starting day one or starting over if you're an experienced owner-operator now, and really getting a budget in place to say, what are my fixed costs per day, but most importantly, what are my costs per mile?
Right.
We've made it very easy with an app, with technology, to just get us information, and we can spit it back to you in a profit and loss statement in real time almost.
Wow.
Almost a business day, so you don't have to worry about it. When I started ATBS almost 15 years ago, we would get boxes of receipts and settlement statements and things like that, and then we would have to input it all, turn it around, and then print a profit and loss statement and mail it to somebody that's out on the road. Today, you take a picture of something on our app. Usually the next business day, we have it posted on your profit and loss statement, so it's updated real time, so you can really track and monitor your changing cost per mile. Different variables like that, so you can change your business overnight and make decisions overnight instead of in arrears.
That's part of the advancement of technology that I talked about, because I think I was talking to Matt Amon years ago about that process of, keeping your receipts, keeping those paper receipts. And obviously, if you're still getting those paper receipts, that's a critical part of it. But now there's so much to that about in technology being able to integrate even the paper receipts into that technology and keep track of it. One thing I've learned about keeping receipts is by the time it comes around to tax time, even if you're filing quarterly, some of the ink on those receipts will fade. Yeah. So the great benefit from that technology is being able to upload those receipts if you're using those paper receipts and being able to integrate that into the technology to make sure you're keeping track of it. Have you seen those practices through ATBS? Have you seen those practices improve with owner-operators out there in terms of tracking their costs along the way?
We have definitely. It's something that we push every day for our clients to make sure that they're checking on that. We monitor it. We reach out. We do everything we can. But yes, when we put out our app, gosh, it's been 5 years ago now. When we put it out, it was a slow integration, similar to cell phones, like we were talking about, where people were reluctant. It's to change what they're doing.
Right.
It's what they're used to.
Yeah.
And so when we started, we maybe got 2% of paperwork through the app. Now it's almost 98%.
Wow.
So it's completely reversed where, hey, just take a picture and get it over with. That way you don't lose it. Like you said, the ink fades.
Yeah.
If you lose it, we can't count it. So let's get it over with. And we've really got that built into the process now, like you said, similar to cell phones where it's just second nature.
Absolutely. And that's it. Developing those practices, those habits of getting it. I had a boss one time that said, well, I've got the touch it once theory, and I put that into practice. And if something comes across my desk, I'm going to deal with it now, get it out of the way, make sure that it's handled, and then move on. That way, that pile on my desk doesn't accumulate. But developing those practices along the way is something that is critical to that. Developing new habits, is that happening, you think, overall at a greater level with owner-operators today?
I believe so, yes. I would say overall, there's still some that struggle with organizational skills, like any part of life.
I'm raising my hand right now.
But again, it's just constantly reminding yourself and having that tool available to do it. So if you just do it 7-8 days in a row, then it's just second nature and you don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Similar to tracking your per diem days and things like that are important for owner operators. Those are important deductions and important things to track and have a count of, because at the end of the year, we need that number. And if it's already done, it's done.
It's done. Absolutely. Gary Buchs, you are an owner operator coach. You're a contributor to Overdrive. So your experience, first of all, give us some background. You were an owner-operator at one time?
Yes, I was an owner-operator, at least with Landstar, 17 years, and very proud of the success and the plan. Retired as planned, successfully. Transitioned into what I'm doing now because I've done so much mentoring, and it's moved beyond mentoring, as I call it.
Yeah.
And the great humbling opportunity through Overdrive to be asked to contribute to business writing and ideas and simple to use practices, behavioral things.
Yeah. You hit something, and when you said retired as planned.
Yes.
Planning requires that developing those practices and having the discipline to maintain those practices.
It's hard to maintain a plan. It's hard. One of the things we find a lot, and I find this as I get older, we'll say things like, well, you need a budget.
Right.
It's easy to say. You need to save. It's easy to say. It's hard to practice. So how do you develop those practices? And what I've found are some tools through working with them through simulation, interactive things where I don't tell people how to run their business. I guide them, and I have them do the practices back to me. Like on these apps, there are a lot of people that still struggle. They don't understand how that works.
Right.
I get on with them, and I show them firsthand. I've had people come to me and say, I bought a bookkeeping program. I don't even know how to use it, and I can't get anybody to teach me.
Yeah.
So that's what I do, is that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, you just hit on something. Those are the things that at times I'll find, something, I'll come across it and the ad looks great and it's like, okay, this is useful in this way. And then I'll get it and then it'll be delivered to my house and then I open it out of the box and then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not sure about this. Now, I know that if I walk through, my wife will always tell me, well, you can start by reading the instructions, but but honestly and seriously, I kind of feel intimidated in implementing that, whatever, if it's a device or a program or whatever it is, and that level of intimidation then brings on that procrastination.
Right.
And I'm guessing that's what you're finding with a lot of owner-operators.
Exactly. They give up. What you're experiencing is the IKEA effect.
Yeah.
You buy.
Yes.
And there are a number of people who have businesses now that will put together your IKEA purchase because people try to do it. They don't know how. So they hire someone to put it together.
Right.
That's very close to what I do. People ask me, well, how many clients do you have? I said, I focus on quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
And they graduate through. I don't want too many. I want to help them move beyond needing what we do.
Right.
To be self-sustaining, that independent owner that they want to become.
Yeah.
One of the things is we have to be careful with technology. We love technology. It's easy. But when we lose focus, when we don't touch the numbers, as I call it, sometimes we don't know what the numbers are as well because we haven't had that interaction.
Yeah.
It's like talking to someone on the phone versus a Zoom versus in person shaking their hand, for example.
Yeah. Sure.
So, yeah.
I have an example of something that Gary just talked about, and it relates right back to the cost the cost valuation, basically.
Right.
The notion of touching the numbers that you're dealing with and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always. And the apps are great. Speed is great. Assistance with programs like ATBS, it's great. But it doesn't always have to be that simple. We ran a story about our trucker of the month for January. His name is Kelvin Schmidt, based up in Minnesota. Anyway, he analyzes his profit and loss per every trip, but it's not a profit and loss statement necessarily. All it is a series of boxes on the back of a piece of notebook paper that shows all of his costs minus or all of his revenue for that trip, and his miles and all of his costs, and then computes the cost per mile for everything that he spent.
Right.
And it shows his fixed costs as well. But he's got folders full of these things, and he he uses them when he's working with his accountant later. But it doesn't have to be snazzy. It's not it's not rocket science really. But by writing these things down, like he feels. I mean, he talked about it this way. He feels like he makes it like just a part of his daily life. Like it's just his thing.
Well, okay, that makes a lot of sense because they always say if you want to remember something, write it down. If you want to, but what you're doing is you're going through that process of first of all that very basic, training that we learn early on in life of writing, and so you're engaging so many motor skills and everything else. But that process of all right, I'm going to make these notes, and I would equate it to my type of organization. You look at it and it's not going to be the neatest.
Yeah.
And so if you have OCD about organization, don't look at my pile, but it is organized in my fashion.
Right.
And I know I can go straight to whatever it is you're looking for. Right. And those are the things, but because and he's created his own process. One of the things that I learned, I don't know, years ago, and I learned it from a nephew actually who's in business, very successful. And he said, I have to develop a process for everything. And so that process is, all right, if I need to do something, it's just like a project around the home. Grab the tools. Okay, what tools am I going to need? All right, maybe I need to make the list. Maybe I need to actually write it down, not just go into my tool closet, and grab things. Write it down. What am I going to need? and then lay them out and make sure they're all here, and then start the project, and everything, and accomplishing that, whatever you're going to do, is going to be much smoother than running back and forth to the tool closet over and over again. That process part of it has been, I think, critical for some of the things that I practice in any of the side businesses that my wife and I have, and also, again, my daily routine for this job.
Right.
And I think that's part of it. And those are the things that I think, Gary, that we can all benefit from. I mean, I'm not perfect at it. I learned it much later in life than probably a lot of people. My nephew shared it with me.
I'll give you a quick example of something that I find. You find a lot of truckers, they're behind on bookkeeping, whether they don't send it in or they're trying to do it in a different system than ATBS or whatever. And they'll say, I got to catch up my bookkeeping. What I've learned is, and this is through my own personal experience, playing catch up doesn't work real well, because what do we do when we catch up? We go back to, man, I got to do like last January.
Yeah.
Okay. You do last January. Does that really give you anything you can use today, this week in your truck?
Right.
Not really.
Right.
So what I teach them is do last week first and work backwards in your bookkeeping rather than catch up from the oldest work. And then when you complete this week, you do last week. Then you go back where you left off and you do another, set an example of do like 3 weeks or 4 weeks at a time, maybe.
Right.
And make those entries or get those in. If you do it that way, you gain a reward psychologically because you are looking at current numbers, if that makes sense. Like Mike talked about the real time. Yeah. Real time information is a motivator. Yeah. It has meaning. It's touching those numbers.
Right.
And that's a big part of the problem. So there's a business tip, whatever you want to call it, for someone. If they're struggling with the motivation, that actually will provide a self-motivating tool.
Sure. And in going through that too, one thing that I've learned is that I don't have to climb the Everest. I can break it down into small hills along the way and say, okay, I can take a week or two with this and say, these are the hours I'm going to dedicate to that. And then do it like it's my job, because it really is. But, at my job, I'm expected to show up on time. So then I'm going to dedicate some time to it. When am I going to do that? What times are best? When am I best suited for that? And when is my mindset best in the day? All right, 10 a.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I'm going to go into the home office. I'm going to sit down, and these are the steps I'm going to take on each day. That you don't have to climb that Everest, because I think that's part of the procrastination, is that it does grow into an Everest in your mind. It's not really an Everest because you can get it done, but it becomes something where people put it off because it's getting bigger and bigger.
You get that anxiety.
Yeah.
And that's a shutdown effect.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And that creates the bigger, the bigger mountain to climb, the bigger hurdle. And, one thing, Mike, I know that you folks at ATBSC, and that is the cost benefit analysis, return on investment ideas. But there are so many things here that we talk about that if you're not taking advantage of all of it, and you're not, again, starting with your cost per mile, but going on also to knowing the tax code. I mean, my gosh. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of pages there are in tax code. But truckers should know the benefits of having that knowledge. And it's just like negotiating rates. It's just like anything else. When you are in business, you need to know what those advantages are. What can you share with drivers from an ATBS standpoint on that part of it, of being knowledgeable about, those outside items like tax code and what you can benefit from?
Yeah, great question. That's something that we do every day, is put out content to help drivers stay aware of what's happening with current tax code. We see so often that owner-operators go to someone local, their friend, their spouse, who might not know anything about the trucking industry. And as you said, especially over the last few years, let's call it the COVID era, there's been many stimulus packages, benefits that you could get, changes to per diem, changes in filing days, things of that nature that are just almost impossible to keep up with. I mean, it's all we do, and it's still hard for us to keep up with.
Right.
And so you just have to have that knowledge base or that resource, which we can be for you, to make sure that you're keeping up with these changes daily, weekly. When it comes out, you need to understand it. I'll give you a good example is the per diem deduction. We see so many new clients that went to an H&R Block or a Jackson Hewitt, and we look at their past tax return, and they didn't even claim the per diem deduction, which is a daily food allowance when you're on the road. It's $69 a day right now.
Wow.
So the average independent contractor is getting $14,000 to $16,000 in deductions just for their food allowance, and we see that missed constantly.
Wow. And again, when you're taking advantage of those deductions, that is money in your pocket. That's money you're keeping in your business. And you hear it all the time. I know you folks hear it, but trucking is that feast or famine thing. But with the planning, it doesn't have to be feast or famine. You can plan because you know the famine's coming back around. That you stock up your business pantry, I guess, if to make sure that as you're taking advantage of all of those benefits and that knowledge, that you're prepared for those leaner times in trucking, which are inevitable. They come around.
They are, yeah. What we've seen, and especially for newer owner-operators that came in during the COVID stimulus freight boom, I would call it, where freight was on fire for 2 years, the longest we've ever seen it be on fire, the highest rates we've ever seen. So people came in to being an owner-operator during that boom time.
Yeah.
And that's all they ever knew, and that's how they think things have always been. But like the economy, like everything, it's a very cyclical business. And so we've seen a lot of bad habits come out of that great time, where people aren't looking at their numbers because they didn't have to.
Right.
Things were so good they didn't have to care about their cost per mile. They didn't have to care about their fuel mileage. And now they do, but they never learned how to do it.
Yeah. Todd, in putting together partners in business, is there anything in this edition this year or in recent years that kind of stands out to you? As Overdrive has covered the industry for so many years and the changes in the industry, is there anything that stands out with that owner operator and some of those stories that you guys hear and covering those stories, but also as it relates to the focus in partners in business? Is there anything in particular that stands out about today's owner operator?
Well, in terms of the content that's in the manual, I think a lot of what Mike was just talking about is in there, and we have a full chapter on understanding fuel costs,
right?
How to improve them, myriad ways to do that, of course. But
sure.
And in terms of in recent times, a lot of what we utilize to update the manual this year, it runs the gamut, really. I mean, it's hard to
pin down one thing.
Pin down one thing. We've got a big new section on spotting the double brokers that work the load boards, which has become such over the last year, so it's been just an explosion of it.
Right.
And that's an interesting issue. It's not one that everyone contends with, but
right. But it does come up every once in a while.
It comes up a good bit for sure, and a lot of carriers. It's easy for carriers to miss it than it is for brokers who are always on these boards and they see it. They see it happening in real time. But anyway, that's a side issue. But I guess today's owner operator, I would agree with what Mike said. A lot of new people in the business, and it's getting to be kind of a tough time, particularly for them. And we just really hope that folks that are particularly new, who haven't taken advantage of this resource, would do so, and feel free to contact us anytime. For any questions that anybody has. If I can't answer something, I can shoot something to Mike. I can shoot it to Gary. I've got like tons of other people that I can send you to.
Yeah.
But it's seriously though, that's a principal message I would have for anybody listening to this for sure.
Right. Take advantage of everything that's available to you.
Yeah. This is a free resource.
Exactly. And those are the things, because I think especially as we sit here at the Mid-America Trucking Show, I've said for years, drivers, if you can afford it, stay all 3 days, spend some quality time. First thing you do is grab a bag and go get the freebies, take those out to your truck, and then come back in.
Right.
Sit in on the seminars. Yep. Sit in and then go to a booth and ask a question. Yep. Find somebody that can answer your question. And those are the things that the free information that's out there will help you make those better decisions along the way. Because if you've got a million questions, then that could get back to the very simple thing of writing them down. Yeah. I'm getting to where I'm doing that now. Okay, I want to write down some bullet points of things that I'm curious about if I am doing an interview or anything like that. But if you've got those questions, write them down, take them with you, and approach that at a show like this. But at any time, there's so much availability of that kind of information, especially with technology. It's easy to find and easy to get those answers. Gary, if you're talking to an owner-operator today, because Todd, touched on it. It is, we are in leaner times right now. The industry is seeing much better. We came out of a very hot pandemic era for the trucking industry, and so there's a lot that is relative, but also there's a lot that is, these headwinds that we're facing, inflation, fuel prices, and everything in between. How do we prepare for that storm on a daily basis? What do we need to do in our operation?
That's great. Here's what I suggest, and I give it as suggestions because you have to modify it to your situation. First of all, we tend to all want to rush the process. We want to speed things up, especially with technology.
Yeah.
You have to take time, identify what is real, what is true. It's that fixed cost we talk about. Mm-hmm. Know what's real, what's true, what are you speculating on? My little grandson, who's 11, he said, I study in algebra. I said, what's algebra? He says, oh, Grandpa, that's when you're searching for a number that you don't know exists. And I go, man, that's trucking if it ever heard anything. And that's what we do. But you begin to identify those lists of what's true, what are you speculating on, what's important, and what's critical.
Yeah.
But I wrote an article about, and I did some research and I read a book, and it talked about it takes 10,000 hours to become a world expert. And they studied people that became like pro athletes or musicians or writers in the amount of time. And I think about when we come into this business, it's like you go to driving school, you become you go with a trainer, then you get in a truck, you might drive for 6 months, and then they say, hey, lease a truck, you're an owner.
Yeah.
That isn't even close to 10,000 hours.
Right.
And here's the other part, 10,000 hours of doing what? Driving or business.
Right.
Business is separate from driving. You got to change hats, folks. The business, when you shut that key off, learn to use that time as a business asset and a personal asset. Stop worrying about what the ELD does. It just records you. That time off is an asset that you can use to do the things that ATBS, Mike's crew, they support you if you use their services. But we see people paying for services but not taking advantage of the service. And that's part of what I'm trying to help encourage and teach people to help Mike, and the owner.
Yeah.
Because Mike's there to help you if you'll let him.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, it was like Gary was just reading my mind, because that was going to be basically my transition to you. And that is, you guys offer so much at ATBS, and over the years have developed and progressed, along with that technology. The app is out there, and you were talking about now the functionality of that app and how many users percentage-wise are creating those great practices and habits every single day. But it does require taking advantage of that so that you can leverage ATBS in the best possible way. And so, what would you add to, what Gary was just talking about, and making sure that you do take full advantage of the offerings of an ATBS?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, it's like Gary said, it's repetition. So when you sign on with ATBS, you get your own business consultant that's there just to help you understand those type of deals, just like Gary does. Maybe not on the crazy scale that Gary uses, because Gary is so in the weeds.
Yeah,
we are too, and we are there to help. And so that consultant can help you on a limited basis.
Yeah.
So when you get your P&L each month, or each week when you see it update, or each day when you see it update, that consultant is there for you to talk about it with,
right,
to look at the numbers, to help you understand it. And so our best clients, the ones that really succeed and move up in the world and add trucks and get it at corporation and have payroll and things like that, they start as a first day trucking company, and they do call in, they do ask those questions, and they review it with somebody who understands it, because you don't understand it when you first start. It looks like hieroglyphics.
Like algebra to me.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Great.
And so the people that call and the people that use the resources and look at those numbers, if you do that for 6 months, a year, and get help, next thing you know, you're reading it by yourself and you didn't even realize it, and you know what's going on a daily basis.
And it's exactly what Gary touched on, the 10,000 hours. Because one thing he also did is divide that. All right, 10,000 hours on which side of it? And we've been talking for years, and with help from you guys and Overdrive, and talking about, all right, the business side of trucking. But those are two different jobs, two different roles that go into the same operation. And you've got to be able to wear both hats. But with those practices along the way, you also hit on something there, and that is, as you are doing that more and more, you understand then next thing you know, you've been using the app for 5 years, and you've been doing this part of it for 5 years, and you changed those habits 5 years ago, and now all of a sudden you've got that knowledge, not just the practices, but you've got that experience in knowing what you're looking at, in knowing the benefit of taking that and parlaying that into, again, a profitable business.
And the important part of that too, or an important part of that, is just knowing, once you've got that down, it's like knowing you sort of develop the ability to adjust, and to know when you really need to.
Right.
It's that's one of the things that a lot of the folks that have been doing this for a long time, as owners or as moving up, adding trucks, doing things like this. That's one of the things they always stress. It's like, whether it's a crisis or whether it's just noticing something that has changed in a small way. Sure. It's like knowing what to do and when to do it, and just following through successfully and adjusting.
Yeah. I started broadcasting at the age of 18, right out of high school. And I try and keep my open mind of all right, what is it I'm not learning? What am I not practicing in what I'm doing? What are the processes that I'm not implementing that could help me? Is there time for a change in that process? And to add on what you're saying, and I actually went through that. It was a few years ago, but I was filling in at our flagship station as a morning anchor, and things move very quickly on morning shows. On the all-night show, we get some time to hang out. It's a lot like a podcast, but on a morning show, it's very quick, and stories are coming across and everything else. And there was just this, I would say, logistical issue that I was having in balancing my sources of information that we follow and having them readily available in front of me, right? So I thought right then and there, it was just one moment that I had on the air, and then right then and there, I redeveloped the process, and that's just the way my mind thinks. And okay, now my process is going to be this, and the laptop is going to be over here, the PC is going to be over here, and my hard copy is going to be right in front of me, and organized. So it was about that reorganization. And, again, this is something that I'm learning much later in my career, probably would have helped me years ago. But I think that's part of it too. And I would say, Gary, that I get one of the lessons that I've learned, and something I would tell others: don't believe you can't learn those new tricks, because those new tricks can be the key.
Yep.
Yeah. Curiosity is a wonderful, think like a grade school child. I have a 6-year-old granddaughter.
Yeah.
Think like her. And one of the things that will really help people is find yourself an accountability partner.
Yeah.
We all have someone in our life that holds us accountable.
Right.
Mine's my wife, I guarantee it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
amen to that.
But in business, it often the spouse is not the best accountability partner for your business.
Mm-hmm.
You need someone who's going to be honest with you. I describe what I do as I'm a sheepdog. I'll guide you.
Right.
The only time I'm going to try to really stop you is if you're going to get eaten by the wolf. I'm going to
Step in front of
I'm going to step in front of you, but I'm going to let you learn. I'm going to guide you to try to help you not hurt yourself. But if we protect people too much in this business, as they learn, they don't learn and they revert backwards. And that's part of what happens so often. We had the great event here the last couple of years. The profits were so great. Now it's like, shoot, I got to work now to get a load.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get a customer. I described to some owners yesterday some tips how to go in or how. I said, who have you hauled for repeatedly? Are you contacting them? Well, no. I go, why not?
Yeah.
Why aren't you contacting the people you've worked with?
Okay. Let's stop and talk to that owner operator, because it was last summer. I was at the Walcott Truckers Jamboree, and I walked up on a driver that I know, Tony Snow, and he had just booked a load and was worried about fuel prices, because he was trying to factor everything in. And he just got off the phone as I was walking up to him. Man, I was trying to book a load, and with fuel prices, and he's trying to work everything out there. And I felt so helpless for him, but I could see that he was like, all right, man, it's tough, booking that. So if you're talking to an owner operator in these lean times of booking that load, you started with something. Those relationships you've built already, those are people that trust you. They've worked with you before. You have somewhat of a reputation with them. What else would you add to that? Where do they go next? What do they need to do in terms of finding those loads, finding, that freight in those lean times?
It begins with best practices on customer service. We are in the customer service business. We're not in the driving business. We're not in the driving fast business. We are in it to make a profit, a return for our families. And so when we go into a customer, don't be the problem, be the solution to their problem. Help them recognize that. When they have other truckers there that are causing trouble, when you get a chance to check in, say, look, it looks like you're having a rough day. Let me know how I can help you.
That's a great way to start. Right there, a great phrase to use. How can I help you?
Here's another thing. Never, ever mention to a customer, hey, can you hurry up? I got to get to another customer. They will slow down on you. They aren't worried about your next customer.
Right.
They want you to be worried about them.
Right.
You never mention your next load. I've had them say, I'd be in the waiting room and they'll go grumbling about, waiting and the clerk could hear us. And I said, well, I'm not really worried. I'm getting $100 an hour to sit here. The clerk would go like that. 15 minutes later, they'd have me in a door out of there because they didn't want me to get $100 an hour.
Right.
Now, whether I got 100 or not, they didn't know. But I knew how to work the system.
Yeah.
But I often did get $100 an hour. Being an owner, I negotiated that ahead of time. That's the thing.
Yeah.
All these things factor in. you price your whole day on the load. You don't just price the mile because you don't know what's going to happen after that. You may have to sit the rest of the day. You've got to pay for the whole day. But we come back to some of those basics of when you're looking for a load building, print your name and put your cell phone number on your bills of lading. Point it out to the customer and say, hey, if I pull out of the dock and there's a problem or a question, you call me directly. Yeah. I've been in the parking lot, had them call and say, we forgot a pallet. Where are you? I said, well, I'm right outside. Oh my gosh, it was maybe 30 minutes, but I was still getting ready to go. If we wouldn't have still been there, if they wouldn't have had my number, they would have had to get an expedite. It would have cost them thousands of dollars to complete that load.
Yeah.
I mean, those little things they remember.
Yeah. Wow. This is just amazing, to think about. And Todd, Gary hit something, and that's the customer service part of it, because drivers deal with so much on the road. I mean, the traffic, maybe any equipment issues, so many things on a day-to-day basis. But treating that customer in that moment like they're the only customer and servicing that, we call it super serving your customer, is something that is a real key in the industry, I think, and the best of them practice that every day.
Yeah, I mean, and it can be difficult to muster the will to
and
to
the
continue
patience.
and the patience to sometimes really commit to that. But that whole conversation there you guys were having made me think of another icebreaker for guys that are have contacts with logistics managers or brokers. Logistics managers, shippers. I mean, and or brokers. This can work too. But this is one from owner operator Henry Albert, who I think most people in here probably know. He and I go back a long ways, but back in probably around the time I met him in 2007, he said, one thing I actually did this, but I always tell this to somebody: if you want to go after like a direct customer, or you do this with your broker as well, just ask them what their toughest load to cover is. Ask them what nobody in their right mind ever wants to do for them.
Right.
And there's a chance that you can.
Yeah.
And if you can, you're going to have that guy for life. So it's that's just one little thing that came to mind when I was thinking about it. And,
I love that, and having talked to Henry so many times over the years. That is truly a Henry Albert approach,
and that's service, right?
That's it. Because Gary, it would be so easy, and there are so many things I know that test the patience. I was just having a conversation with my wife. I'm working on my patience skills after 32 years plus marriage. And it wasn't even anything involving her. She was just hearing me go, blah, 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 and moan and groan about something. But with drivers, I know that at times you do get impatient because things aren't going as planned or whatever. But if we do change that, if we make a positive move in a positive direction in our mindset, and say, all right, this is the way I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to lean into it. I can't change anything about what's going on right now, so let me see if I can change it for the better, and ask them, hey, what do you need? Can I help you out here? Just let me know.
It's that first day on the job attitude. If you ever watch, I would go to a lot of orientations in the Landstar system, for example, and I would sit in and evaluate for them. And when people are new to a company, they want to help everybody.
Yeah.
They don't complain about anything. They want to do everything they can to be liked.
Right.
A month later, growling.
Yeah.
But here's the thing to remember: if you're an owner, every time you finish a load, you're fired.
Yeah.
You're unemployed.
Right.
If you are an independent or a lease operator picking your own loads, you have to get rehired.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a big part of, again, this mindset. There are so many. That's at 10,000 hours of things we talk about.
Yeah.
There are so many, and you don't run across them every day. That's the other part. So you have to have, You got to work on those habits of recognition when they trigger you to what to do. The right. You got to know the right responses when you're triggered.
Yeah. One thing that I hear from drivers, and I know Todd, Mike, Gary, you've all heard it. And from drivers, we get that feedback. We're kind of the sounding board a lot, But it's, I want to be treated as a person, not a number. I think if we take that on, then we have to have that practice in how we treat others. Definitely. There's somebody there and they're struggling, and maybe they're impatient because something's going on there. But if we can offer that solution, if we can be the solution, it's like you said, Todd, friends for life, right? Mm-hmm. And once you do that, then they're going to be thinking of you in that way, and they're going to look to you for that solution.
Yeah, and that's what I think, and how I'm going to teach my kids is you have to be the bigger person in every instance. You think about driving, you're stuck in traffic, you're getting cut off by cars constantly. It takes you all day to get to somewhere that should have taken you half the day. You get to the shipper, and there's not enough staff there in the post-pandemic world, so you're sitting there waiting for staff to unload you. Not only that, but they won't let you in to use the bathroom, right? And so there's so many trigger points along the way where it's like, I am being treated terribly, but you have to be the bigger person and deliver that customer service like we've been talking about. Because you've been beat up the whole way, but you still have to be the bigger person.
Yeah, and I think we could put Gary and we could put Henry Albert in this category of those guys that, man, those guys are, he'll do anything for you. That guy's a lovely guy, man. He's always got a great attitude. If your customer is thinking of you that way, you're at the top of their list every day, all day. That's what it's all about. Gentlemen, this has been just a tremendous honor to have you all here in this room to do this podcast. We want to thank Shell Rotella for making this podcast possible, and Overdrive for all that they do. And ATBS, thank you guys for being so generous with your time over the years. And once again here, Mike, because it is critical. One of the things that is the hardest thing to hear from a driver, and I do remember it was right when around 99, 2000, we were starting to get calls about drivers having to park their truck. They couldn't afford the spike in fuel, and things were different back then. But it was like going from $1.29 to $1.59, and wow, to have $1.59 again would be just a dream. But that jump at that time was crippling for them. And it just became, I think, something that was personal for me, thinking about both my grandfathers, thinking about my dad and others, and what it's like to be out there on the road. And then applying it to a small business owner, for owner-operators, and knowing that, my gosh, there's this whole other side to it that is absolutely critical. So I think these conversations are critical. I'd love to do this again sometime. But I want to thank you all for being here.
And a big thanks to you, Eric, for having us. It's great Eric Harley, everyone. Find the Red Eye Radio Extra Mile podcast via redeyeradioshow.com. And like I said at the top, catch a bevy of short videos from this talk via a playlist on our YouTube channel. I'll post a link to it in the show notes and in the post that houses the podcast at the world-famous overdriveonline.com when it goes live Memorial Day, Monday, May 29th, 2023. Thanks to the Howes Company for their support of Overdrive Radio. You can find them at Howes, that's HOWES, HowesProducts.com. Any feedback for us, leave a message on our podcast line at 615-852-8530. Always love to hear from you. Overdrive Radio is a production of Overdrive, the voice of the American trucker. It's edited and produced by me, Todd Dills, with the acoustic guitar and other support of trucker songwriter Long Haul Paul Marhofer. The theme is Legend of the Snake Man by Marhofer, featuring the guitar work of Travis the Snake Man himself, Lamech. Terry Two Socks Richardson on bass, keys by Tishomingo Jim Whitehead, and on drums, Andrew Marshall. The podcast is backed up further by Overdrive's own news editor Matt Cole, social media coordinator Holly Young, executive editor Alex Lockey, and video editors Lawson Rudisell and Andrew Quinn. Keep it pro.